allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Dahman. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
The motion on the floor made by Rick, seconded by Leslie to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving down to D, action on minutes, which are in board docs.
I'll move to approve the minutes for the regular meeting held on November 22nd, 2021 as presented.
Second that.
There's a motion on the floor made by Leslie, seconded by Dave to approve the minutes for the regular meeting held on November 22nd, 2021 as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item E, action on vouchers, which also are in board docs.
Mr. President, I will move to approve general checking account vouchers totaling $1,104,448.06 and the building fund 49 vouchers totaling $70,581.60 as it appears in board docs.
I'll second that.
Motion on the floor made by Joe, seconded by Rick, to approve general checking account vouchers totaling $1,104,448.06 and the building fund 49 vouchers totaling $70,581.60 as in board docs. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item F, student council report. Mesa, thank you for being here. Look forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Okay, so for tonight's student council update, we're going to start with the blood drive results. We had 72 presenting donors. 64 of those were first-time donors. We collected 54 whole blood units and 9 power red, which are the double ones, for a total of 63 total units collected. This equates to 189 potential lives saved. And then for this holiday season, the Student Council is donating gift cards to families in need. Thank you and have a great night.
Moving on to item G, public comment. We have a few people signed up tonight. So before we get started, just a brief summary of the policy. Public comment is limited to 15 minutes with 3 minutes given to each speaker. I will have my timer on my clock, and as a courtesy to you, if you are speaking when you have 30 seconds left, I will just say 30 seconds, which is an indication that you have 30 seconds left to wind up your thoughts. Public comment is limited to items on the agenda for the evening. Participants will introduce them. Please introduce yourselves by name before beginning. I also would like to remind all speakers that masks are required during public comment, and participants will address the whole board, not particular board members or other staff members. Board members will not respond as public comment is not a question and answer session. So we will start with Dan DeFore.
Hello, I'm Dan DeFore. I'm a resident of Janesville, and I live in the Milton School District. I'm speaking tonight on the misnamed Milton Forward Plan. We now have plenty of data and information to suggest that it's drastically missed the mark. To start with, in the Milton School District, we are now hearing of increased mental health issues among students, as well as reports of low morale among teachers. Then last month, we received the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction annual scorecard report. To say this was disappointing would be a tremendous understatement. Now, I know the state and district like to report in 3-year averages, as done in the achievement score, but let me ask you this. If your child came home and said they had received an F this year in math, but said, don't worry, because I received B's the previous 2 years, so the average is a C, would you be satisfied? Well, In the 2-year time span between the last two scorecard reports, which, by the way, and interestingly coincides with the tenure of the current superintendent, the results are alarming. Of course, there are a few bright spots to be recognized, but when you look broadly across the district, it tells a troubling story. That is, when you compare the 2018-19 scorecard to last year's 2020-21 scorecard results, you find the following. Milton's overall scorecard rating declined from exceeds expectations to meets expectations. It's interesting to note that 2 other school districts in Rock County maintained their exceeds expectations status over the same time period. Milton's ranking based on the accountability score went from being ranked 95th highest in the state to 297th last year. Sadly, last year's Milton accountability score dropped over 4 times faster than the state average. Most importantly, English language arts and math proficiencies in Milton also dropped faster than the state average. Now, only 42 out of 100 students on average are proficient at grade level in English language arts, according to the latest report. Sadly, approximately 180 additional students on average dropped below proficiency level over the past 2 years. Additionally, only 41 out of 100 students on average are proficient at grade level in math.
30 seconds.
Sadly, approximately 320 additional students on average dropped below the proficiency level over the past 2 years in the Milton School District. Clearly, it's time for a change. We cannot continue to blindly follow a plan which clearly is not working. We expect the board to step in and do what's right for the students, their lives, and their future. Start with voting mass choice district-wide after the holiday break. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeFore. Next on the list is Karen Woodland.
Good evening. My name is Karen Woodland. I have 2 students at the Milton High School. I'm here to ask the board to vote tonight for mask choice beginning immediately. At this point, masking our children only in school feels a lot like theater. Nowhere in our regular lives are we ever wearing masks. Nowhere besides school are my children wearing masks. And every day we see the important people who insist on masking also not wearing masks. We've all seen events for the elite where the elite don't have to wear masks, but the servants and staff do. I could go on and give you a number of examples of the theater that we all witness on a daily basis, yet no one here can make it make sense. I attended the wrestling meet on Friday night at the Milton High School, and I was so pleased to see the student section filled with students living their lives. Judging by the placement of their masks, you can pretty much gather that they're over it too. There is just so much inconsistency and nonsense. We are all living our lives. We eat out, we attend events, we go shopping, and we travel. And yet our children are masked for the most important hours of their day. Our kids are smart. They see the theater and they see the hypocrisy too. They know you aren't wearing masks every day, all day as you go about your daily lives, except of course when you step foot in a school district building. And they wonder how it is that you're okay making them wear one for 7 hours a day. Only the safest segment of the population is forced to live this way, the population least at risk for a poor COVID outcome. And you know, I get it. I suppose it probably feels better to do something rather than nothing, except that the something that you're doing makes no sense and also causes harm. You've heard from many of the parents here tonight share with you over the past several months their personal stories of harm to their very children that include things like headache, loss of engagement, depression, anxiety, speech delay, and more. And now we know without a doubt that their learning is being negatively affected, as evidenced by the DPI scores. I'm sure we're about to hear some very bad news in the superintendent update about the high number of cases, which will lead some of you to say, how could we possibly remove masks now? I really hope you can see that the numbers are not an indication to just mask harder. They are a clear indication that no matter how hard you mask our kids, you can't stop this virus. We have to learn to live with it. If masking saved lives, there would be no breaks. Like the theater that we see, you can't just take off a mask if it's literally saving your life. If you work around dangerous aerosols and particulates, you never remove your personal protective equipment. This district is surrounded on all sides in this area by mask choice. For some of you, the goalpost for mask choice has been vaccination. We're there. Every school-age child now has that opportunity. And for some, masks may still be desired, and they will always have that choice. We're simply asking for that choice. Smiles, connection, and kindness are far more contagious than COVID. Our kids really need that right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Woodland. Next on the list is April Yohanna.
I am reading on behalf of a teacher that probably wouldn't speak because they're fearful of you. It says, "Good evening. I am a Milton School District teacher who has taught numerous years in the district. I'm sharing my perspective tonight because it is important for the board to hear how mandated masking is affecting our students and staff."
Ms. Yohanna, could you please pull up your mask?
My 6 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I get it after time.
I was hired to teach children, to provide a safe and positive learning environment for all of my students, to differentiate instruction, to foster student success. If I am being honest, mandated masking has made it a real struggle to do that this past year and a half. My mind has often been more focused on following the COVID protocols than actual content of the lessons I teach. Are the students spaced enough? Do the students have their mask on? Should they be sharing learning materials? Am I going to get in trouble if one of my students has his or her mask down? If I, as an adult, have had these anxious and nervous feelings, I can only imagine how my students feel when they are told multiple times a day to keep their masks over their nose and mouth. What are we teaching our students? To be afraid to breathe without a mask? To be afraid of others? To always be afraid of getting sick? I believe for some, we are teaching them just that. There are students that will cover their mouth and nose with their hand when they need a new mask because they forgot one at home, or they lost it outside, or because it broke. How is this helpful to our students' mental well-being? How much longer are we going to play these mind games with our students by forcing everyone to wear a mask? Whitewater School District is comparable in size to Milton and began the school year with mask choice. They have far less COVID cases than we do. Recently, the Fort Atkinson School Board voted unanimously to return to mask optional on Friday for all students 4th through 12th grade on December 17th. According to the Daily Jefferson County Union, Fort Atkinson Superintendent said the Omicron variant of COVID-19 presumably does not pose any immediate concern for the student and staff. That's great news. One of the board members stated, "I think December 17th is fine for masks to go optional. At that point, we've done our due diligence, making sure that vaccines have had a chance to work through for anyone wanting to do that." Another Fort Atkinson board member stated, "I think we did our due diligence as a board, and I personally don't know how much more time I can focus on this topic anymore. It's time for the Milton Forward Plan to move us forward. Teachers were hired to teach. Students need to learn. Allow students the choice in how they feel most comfortable learning with or without a mask." Thank you.
After months of emails and speaking here, it's not going to be a shock that I'm here to speak about Milton Forward Plan. It also won't be a shock when the superintendent tonight most likely quotes hospital capacity numbers from the county health without telling you if they even include COVID patients. And then our district numbers as a whole instead of split individual schools so they look more dire, promoting as typical scare tactics on why we need to continue with masks. Despite the fact that yet another new variant making headlines, COVID is still less deadly than the regular flu to kids. Compare our mitigation to districts like Waukesha, who have been mask choice since the very beginning of the year and have maintained a very low transmission rate throughout the year. Then we have Fort Atkinson, who just went completely mask choice following several other districts in our area. Our district fell in proficiency 4 times faster than the state average since COVID, based on DPI. Our children have a right to the best future they can achieve, and that is not what they have been getting under the administration and supervision leadership. In a letter I received just last month from Mr. Dahman, he claimed, "We feel that it is very possible to make both things happen," in reference to providing a high quality education along with policies to mitigate COVID risk. You don't get to have it both ways and say that low testing scores are a result of COVID and then turn around and say your policies regarding COVID have no proof of decreased academic performance. When do we get to the high quality education part of this plan? Milton Forward has not been the huge success that the superintendent continues to pat himself on the back for. And our dismal proficiency scores are proving that. There is no way you can solely blame COVID for that dramatic of a decline. As you are all in charge of overseeing student achievement, you only have the superintendent and yourselves to blame for this failure. Again, the school board's purpose is to work with the community to improve student achievement in our school, not make our medical recommendations and decisions. By now, you have all done more than your due diligence in allowing people time to get their kids vaccinated if they wish to do so. It is not your place to continue to make these decisions over families' personal beliefs and religious rights. And let's not forget that mask choice doesn't mean they can't continue to wear a mask if they so choose. Our district has serious issues plaguing it over several schools: drug busts and online bullying in the high school shooting threats in the middle school, biased political homework being given in the elementary school, all in just the last couple weeks. It's time to shift focus away from the current destructive, negative, and fear-based policies held tight by our superintendent. Stop playing politics with our children's future and choose mass choice for the district, effective immediately. Thank you.
Next time, thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. Next on the list is Mike Miller.
Good evening. My name is Michael Miller. My wife and I have 2 kids here in the Milton School District. My daughter is in 4th grade and my son is in 1st. I am here tonight to share my thoughts on the Milton Forward Plan and specifically the masking protocol. I urge you tonight to vote for mask choice for all students in our district. I've shared with each one of you a graphic that has compared all 8 districts in Rock County and how they compare to each other when it comes to COVID positive cases. It would be hard to decide which one of the 8 has the best or lowest case counts. What the data shows is the case counts climb and they drop. Oftentimes, all 8 districts run together. Although there is a very little difference in the data, there is a huge difference in the fact that 5 of the 8 schools have a form of mask choice. I will repeat, 5 of the 8 districts have mask choice, and their numbers are really no different at all. I don't have the numbers of our neighboring district, but I know that Fort, Jefferson, Whitewater, all have some form of mask choice. There are 4 school districts in Dane County that tried to vote for mask choice but got shot down by the mandate extension. Over the past few months, it seems as though the driving factor in giving the choice to wear a mask or not has been to get vaccine numbers in the district up. The percentage of people, both staff and students, that are vaccinated has indeed gone up dramatically. The vaccine is readily available to anyone within the district to get if they choose to. I would think it's safe to say that anyone that plans to get vaccinated has done so at this point. Throughout the school year, I've struggled to understand the logic behind keeping our children in masks. The graphs that I've emailed to you all show that wearing them really has no effect on the number of COVID cases whatsoever. Now, with the vaccine percentage being where it is, the choice should be very clear. The choice is to unmask our children. This pandemic has been hard for many people and many businesses. Some will never be able to recover, and some say we will have a variation of COVID forever. Some people may choose to continue to wear a mask, and that's okay. That is their choice. As a parent in this district, I hope you vote tonight to give me my choice back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next is Amy Holden.
I am reading this letter tonight on behalf of a teacher. Dear Milton School Board, I write to you as a concerned employee of the Milton School District. I have worked for this district for many years and have always enjoyed my job and work environment. However, this last year and a half have been hard. It is even harder to find joy in my career. As a teacher, I work with both students and families. Those families and students are our community. One of my many jobs is to be a bridge between the school and the community. Yet with the mask mandate put into effect in late August, you have caused a strain on that bridge. You have created a divide in our community and therefore a divide in the schools. The strain has made my job considerably harder and less appealing to continue to work for this district. I have parents on both sides of the issue, but my job is not to be the mask police. I am always striving to increase academic skills and build upon social emotional skills, and yet the focus of our district seems to always go back to the mask. I hear on a daily basis in the hallways, keep your mask up. Why don't you have a mask? Get a clean mask. Just this Friday, a student walked into the school with his head down. When he saw me, he looked up and sadly said, I forgot my mask. This should not be a concern as soon as a student steps foot into the school. We are supposed to be setting students up for success. What is this doing to our students' social and emotional well-being when we don't focus on the greeting or the positive remark, but instead on their mask? If you would have created a mask optional environment for all grade levels, this would be a non-issue. According to the district professional development, students need to see smiles, facial gestures, and students need at least 5 positive interactions each day to every 1 negative interaction to best support and sustain constructive student-teacher relationships. Parents and staff should have the choice to wear a mask or not. You as a board stated that the mask mandate needed to happen, yet it divided our community and you have offered no compromise over the last 3.5 months. You have made excuses over the percent of students vaccinated, our dashboard numbers, and how you as an individual feel fear with COVID, all to stall any movement on the compromise over masks. Surrounding districts that have mask optional have numbers comparable to ours. They have not had to offer virtual learning, and far fewer healthy students are being sent home as a close contact. With that, they have also increased their student academic achievement and have been recognized for that nationally. Milton needs to start moving forward like the districts that surround us. As an employee, I know we need to move on. We need to get back to the basics of teaching. We need to bring our community together and repair the bridge between school and home. We need to start building on the academic and social emotional skills that are currently lagging in the district. We need to have all students and staff go to the mask optional school day starting now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holden. Mr. Domlin, would you check to just make sure no one else has signed up after I picked up the sheets? Okay, thank you very much for checking. All right, we'll move on to item number 2, the superintendent update. We'll start with item A, update, discussion, and possible action on the Milton Forward Plan. Mr. Dahman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. There are a couple different things that I want to share. There is some information found in board docs, and we're going to refer to some of that information, starting with a memo that's listed. The memo has a large amount of data. The data comes from the Rock County Public Health Department. I'm going to walk through some of that, add some specific data from our school district. And to start with on that first bullet point, as of December 6th, which was last week, there were 93.51 active positive cases among all individuals within our school district boundary. That is up from the last board meeting. At the last board meeting, it was 64.2 positive cases. That was as of November 22nd. And that 93.5 is a continued increase. It's the highest number of positive cases across our school district since December 10th of 2020, so since almost a year ago. If you remember back at this time a year ago, the number of positive cases were going down. So although it was at about the same level that it is now, that trend was decreasing, whereas now that trend is increasing. And again, that is the number of active positive cases per 10,000 people across our entire school district, not specific just to students or staff. As of December 9th, which was Thursday of last week, the number of positive cases and percent of positive tests remains high across the county. Hospitalizations, there are currently 57 individuals hospitalized in Rock County. We do share that number out on a regular basis with the board. The information from Rock County Health Department is that hospitals are reporting to be at capacity, including those 57 individuals who were hospitalized with COVID. Of those 57 individuals, 20% of them are fully vaccinated, and the average age of those fully vaccinated hospitalized patients is 75, whereas 80% of those hospitalized are unvaccinated with an average age of 57. As of December 9th, there have been 236 deaths due to COVID in Rock County, which is an increase of 9 since November 22nd. As of December 9th, our COVID dashboard shows an increase to 42 active positive cases and 106 close contacts among students, and 1 active positive case and no close contacts among staff. Of the student active positive cases, 15 of those are in grades 7 through 12, and 27 are in grades 4K through 6. And of the student close contacts, 21 are in grades 7 through 12, and 85 are in grades 4K through 6. That is the highest number of active cases that we've had among our students in a while. And I do want to add some new information to that we got today from our schools, so that the board has up-to-date information. Since that December 9th day where there were 42 active cases across the district, we've had a considerable number of new active cases. 13 people dropped off of that list of 42. But we've had 23 new active cases to put us at a total of 52 active cases. Those are mainly at Northside and at West Elementary. We've had a significant number of positive cases come in over the weekend and throughout the day today at both of those schools. At West, we've had 10 new positive cases since the end of last week, which puts them at 78 active cases and 58 students who are currently quarantined at Northside. And at West, we've had 7 new positive cases since Friday, and that puts them at a total of 15 active cases. We had a discussion with Rock County Health Department today about the status at both of those schools, and they don't recommend moving to virtual learning at this time, but we did talk through ensuring at those 2 schools that we limit a transition time for students, keep students in their classroom cohorts as much as possible, increase the physical distancing in the lunchroom between now and the holidays, do some deep cleaning and make sure we're maximizing the fresh air intake, particularly at those 2 schools. So again, number of positive cases at the end of last week, active positive cases across all of our schools was 42. We've had 23 new cases since last Thursday, We've had 13 students drop off the active case list, so we now are at 52 positive cases. We want to strongly encourage and promote vaccinations for all eligible people that don't have a medical condition. Boosters are now available for those 16 and 17-year-olds who would like to take part in that. That's as of last week. And our fully vaccination data as of Friday the 10th, our 12 through 18-year-olds, 67% of them are fully vaccinated. So that's a positive number. We're pleased with the continued increase in that number. That was about 49% at the start of the school year. And again, now for our 12 through 18-year-olds, it's at about 67%. Our 5 through 11-year-olds who were recently made eligible for the vaccine are only at 8.3% vaccinated, or 8.3% fully vaccinated. 21.1% of our 5 through 11-year-olds have received their first dose. And those numbers compare to 64% of the overall individuals in Rock County right now, as of right now, are fully vaccinated. So we are pleased with that vaccination rate for our 12 through 18-year-olds. We continue to strongly encourage people, if they haven't had a chance to get vaccinated, to do that. It remains to be a very low rate at our 5 through 11-year-olds at only 8.3%. We're keeping an eye on the Omicron variant in discussions with Rock County Health Department. The early report is that it's more contagious, but potentially lessened symptoms. But there's not certainty around that yet because it is new. There's also an early report that vaccines without the booster may not be working as well as they did with the first strain or the Delta strain. The bottom bullet point on the document talks about, as of December 7th, the Rock County COVID-19 vaccine dashboard shows overall vaccination data and compares outcomes between those fully vaccinated and not fully vaccinated. And I want to take a quick look at that. Marcy, on the screen, if you can click on the link for that. And excuse me for a minute, I'm going to give me just a moment to pull it up on my screen. Yeah, there's a few different pages there. The first page has some overall data for vaccinations. Again, this is across the whole county, so this isn't specific to our district. But Rock County updates this on a regular basis. It does show the number of people vaccinated continuing to grow, but a ways to go. I want to look at the second page of that, because the second page really demonstrates the differences in the number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths for those who have been vaccinated and those who haven't been vaccinated. And that's why we continue to strongly encourage folks to get vaccinated. You can see the number of cases per 100,000 is much higher for those, about 4.4 times higher for those who have been unvaccinated compared to those who've been vaccinated. Hospitalizations also about 4.3 times more likely to be hospitalized in Rock County if you're not vaccinated compared to vaccinated folks, and about 5.3 times as many deaths in Rock County from folks who are unvaccinated compared to those vaccinated. And that's data that's going from September 1st of this year through the end of November. Some notes on the bottom, if we go back to the memo, some notes that I have on the bottom. Vaccination and masking continue to play an important role in our layered COVID-19 protocol. They've been shown to both limit the spread of COVID-19 and decrease the number of close contacts. Students and staff are strongly encouraged again to take advantage of vaccination opportunities. We're pleased with that overall vaccination rate. And while we currently see increased positive cases and hospitalizations across the state, county, and our school district, the local positive cases and corresponding close contacts are considerably higher at our 4K through 6 schools than they are at the high school and the middle school. A couple other things that I want to highlight. We have followed the two principles that have served us very well throughout the pandemic of limiting the risk to the safety of students, staff, families, and community, and continuing to provide a high-quality education for all students. We continue to communicate with Rock County Public Health Department on a regular basis. And at this point, as at every point throughout this process, we really have three different options. We have an option of tightening our safety protocol, of loosening our safety protocol, or of keeping our current protocol in place and continuing to monitor the situation. In the memo that was prepared for the board last week, I did have a recommended motion. In that recommended motion, it was that we would update the Milton Forward Plan to remove universal masking for staff and students in grades 7-12, beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th of 2022. The reason for that date was to allow time for people to return from the holidays. If there were positive cases, some time for those to be sorted out before we made that change. Also included in that recommendation from last week was to continue universal masking for staff and students in all grades 4K through 6 schools, to be revisited at the first board meeting following the number of positive cases decreasing for 2 consecutive weeks for students in those grades, to continue universal masking on all student transportation for all students, and to have outside groups and attendees at events at our district facilities follow the COVID-19 safety protocol for that location. Because of the increased number of cases since I put this memo together, as I shared earlier, I don't any longer support that recommendation. My recommendation would be that we continue with our current COVID protocol because of the increased number of cases, even at the middle school and high school. Even though the number of positive cases isn't rising as fast at the high school and middle school as it is at the elementary schools, a lot of those students are in the same families, go home to the same houses. We'll be spending some time over the holidays together. So my recommendation to the board would be that we continue to monitor the situation, keep our current protocol in place, and revisit the situation in January when we come back from the holidays. So we open it up for any questions or comments from school board members.
I have a question, Rich. Before we potentially...
You're muted.
Oh, I'm muted, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Before we look at a motion, or if there one is to appear, I had a couple of questions relative to what you had suggested. How does the student transportation piece work with that? I know that it's an evolution out of the federal mandate for public transportation, which school buses are considered. Is that actually the case? And if we chose to not do that, what would be the jeopardy?
It is the case that the requirement for public transportation, which it's been ruled that school transportation is considered public transportation. So it is a requirement across the county that any school transportation has required masking. We would continue to monitor that. If at some point we made a change to...
I believe you're muted, Rich.
I'll recap the start of that. In general, Joe, you had asked about the masking on transportation. It is a federal requirement for all schools across the entire country for masking, not just for schools, but any public transportation, and schools have been deemed public transportation. So we would need to continue to follow that until that's changed at a federal level. The second part of your question is what would be the impact of us deciding not to follow it? I hope that we wouldn't put our staff in a position where we're asking them to violate the law. So if something has been deemed to be a mandate across the entire country, My recommendation would be that we follow that because we don't have a choice to not follow something that's the law.
Well, I just want to, are you done? Jim?
Well, I only was going to follow up.
Okay.
Do you happen to know in districts that have mask choice, I'm sorry. In districts that have mask choice, are those students masking on the bus but not at school?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'm finished.
Okay. I don't think it's any surprise that I'm going to talk. But I did want to thank you, Mr. Dahman, for that memo. It was very detailed, had a lot of information in it. And I know that we haven't seen eye to eye on this particular issue, but I am thankful that you were taking steps to make a recommendation to move us forward. I was going to make a motion to have mass choice begin immediately, but in reviewing your recommendation previous, before you changed it, and the discussion from the last board meeting where everybody weighed in, I actually would like to make a motion to amend the Milton Forward Plan to include the following. To remove universal masking for all students and staff beginning at the start of the school day, January 10th, and then continue universal masking on buses per the federal mandate. And I guess I can wait for a second if there is going to be one before I add to that kind of the reasons why I changed your original recommendation, but I can leave it at that.
I'm sorry, Leslie, I was trying to follow along.
Yep,
Can
no.
you repeat it?
Absolutely. So the motion is to amend the Milton Forward Plan to include the following. Remove universal masking for all students and staff beginning at the start of the school day, January 10th. So I kept the original date from Rich's recommendation of January 10th, except I made it for all students and staff rather than a staggered start. And I guess I'll just give you the reason for that right now. And that was because it would be difficult to have 2 consecutive weeks of continued decline in numbers. I mean, it is possible, I suppose, but in not knowing whether we would have 2 consecutive weeks for the younger students, that could then extend their universal masking for many more weeks while we were waiting. And I don't see that the numbers that you've given and that I find in the Rock County Health Department and across the state to indicate that that is necessary to make them wait for that. It also goes back to the argument of the vaccine rate, where it was pointed out last time, Dave, I think you brought it up, that we wanted to give the younger kids more time. So that gives them that additional time beyond the break to get that vaccine, should they so choose to do that. So.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor made by Leslie to amend the Milton Forward Plan as follows. 1, to remove universal masking for all students at the start of the school day of January 10th, and to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12.
And it was supposed to include staff.
And staff, students and staff.
Are we still in discussion, Mike?
We can be, or there is a motion on the floor. I would welcome a second.
I guess I'll make a comment. So at the last meeting and for a while now, I've stated the goal of giving kids in all grade levels a chance to get vaccinated. And as you look at the upper grades, by and large, that's been pretty well embraced in the percentages, with over 3/4 of students over 15, over half of those over 12 to 14, achieving that status. We're still very early in the 5 through 11 stage, because again, this just came online a few weeks ago. I would like to see those percentages come up because vaccines work. The data proves that over and over again. I could support the recommended action that was presented in the agenda with the staggered start, but would like to see, because again, none of this 5 through 11 group, or almost none of them, have had a chance to become fully vaccinated yet. I would support the recommended action as presented on the agenda, but that would be as far as I would go today.
Can I just ask, because you've brought up vaccine rates again, and for the younger kids, at what rate would you be comfortable offering them mass choice?
So, not being a medical doctor, I don't know that that's my call to make, but what I would tell you is that the way it's presented, that there's an inverse relationship between vaccination rate and the cases of infection, and so I feel like that will work itself out. However, if some new data should present itself that says otherwise, then we'll certainly revisit it. It isn't etched in stone, but I think it's a prudent way to approach it at this time.
I have a question relative to the vaccines on our youngest students. And I know probably we don't have a definitive answer, but the data, or the bullet point there said 8% roughly that are vaccinated. Is that considered fully vaccinated? So that's through their second shot, which is a 21 or 28 day gap from the first shot. Is that correct?
Yes, the 8% is considered fully vaccinated, so it's not just having received both shots, but it's a 2-week gap since they had their second dose.
And we've only been able to vaccinate those kids since, what, early November?
That's correct.
Do we think there are a significant number of those kids that are sort of vaccinated but not considered fully vaccinated because the time hasn't? My question is, we're 8% now. What are we on January 10th? Is there a big chunk of kids that become
I think it's
counted?
The data that we have to go by is that a little bit over 21% of that age group have received their first dose.
Okay.
So the assumption is that if they receive their first dose, they would either have already or be lined up to get their second dose, and then have to wait those 2 weeks between now and January 10th, or now and January 24th. That would be enough time potentially for that number, that 8% number, to go up.
Rich, when was the date that we did that first round of dosage for those young
November
kids?
7th, Carrie?
Yes, November.
November 16th was the first, December 7th was the second.
And we're scheduled to bring those second doses back, right, to offer to our students?
The second dose was offered on December 7th. We don't have any more vaccine clinics lined up that we're hosting, but we are sending out to parents some information about free vaccine clinics that are available in the area that the Rock County Health Department offers.
Can we ask if anybody was second?
I will remind the board there is a motion on the floor that still needs a second if we're to vote on it.
I'll second the motion on the floor.
All right. There is a motion on the floor made by Leslie, seconded by Joe, to amend the Milton Forward Plan as follows. 1, to remove universal masking for all students and staff at the start of the school day on January 10th. And 2, to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12. Is there any more discussion on that?
Yeah, I have a question. When does our semester? When is our semester break for the younger kids?
The first day of the second semester is on Monday, January 24th.
So 2 weeks after the date in the motion.
again, Coach, I have not been in favor of the January 10th date. I don't think that gives us enough time after break to see what kind of contact people had, the families had over break. I'm in favor of continuing with the date, and keeping in place what we had originally talked about. The second semester change the date, and maybe we have to look at readjusting this and the first quarter in January. First board meeting in January versus the second board meeting, which is going back from the break period thing. They're not waiting until the 24th, so you can see where we're at with that.
I didn't understand what you were saying. I'm sorry, Jill. Can you repeat that or give a brief?
Okay.
I didn't understand what you were saying because the feedback
in the microphone made it very hard to hear.
I said I'm not in favor of this date, but I'd like to keep it in place to what we originally had. And just keeping things status quo, but possibly revisiting at the first board meeting instead of the second board meeting like we've been doing, so that we can see what our data is at that point. If we choose that number and then we don't know what the data is and we haven't seen increases, decreases, whatever, hopefully we'll see decreases, but if we haven't, we don't have nothing to judge that on that date.
Any more discussion on the motion?
If there's one more thing that I could share, I want the board, before they take action, whether it's on this motion or another motion, to make sure that as we move forward, it's with an understanding that the universal masking decreases the number of positive cases and decreases the number of close contacts. So it's clear that when we remove the universal masking, we can expect that there will be more positive cases, and we can expect that there will be potentially significantly more close contacts. Many students are not considered a close contact because both the person who tested positive and the person that they're interacting is wearing their masks. So I want to make sure that as the board makes their decision, they're aware of that fact.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm glad you brought that up. So with the quarantine and close contact policy, so you gave us an update today that there were a lot of close contacts, specifically in Northside. Is that correct? So I think we spoke about this before, but I guess I didn't understand clearly. So how is a close contact determined? And because if we're universally masked, and if you've got two masked students and neither are showing symptoms, and you take into account the vaccination, like how is that all working? Can you explain that again? I'm sorry.
Yep. A student is considered a close contact if they're within 3 feet of a student that tests positive for an accumulated 15 minutes throughout the day, and they either are not both wearing their mask properly during that time, or they're not masked at all. You spoke specifically to Northside in a conversation with the principal at Northside today. A significant number of the close contacts in school at Northside are during lunchtime, when obviously people aren't wearing their masks.
So are we not social distancing more during lunch then because of that? Like, are we not taking those precautions and
we are physically distancing at lunch as much as we can within the confines of our space and our schedules, but there definitely are times when students are inside 6 feet of each other during lunchtime.
So with your recommended motion, how are you going to address that close contact? Because it wasn't in your recommended motion, and you just brought up that if we vote on this motion, that it would increase the number of cases. So how are you going to deal with that?
I didn't share that it would be specific to a vote on this case. I think that I said that either in this motion or another motion, anytime we consider removing masks, we need to do it with the knowledge that the balance to that is that there likely will be more positive cases and more close contacts.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to misquote you, but I mean, you made a recommendation of going mass choice for the upper grades on January 10th. How were you going to address that close contact issue? Because that wasn't in your motion, the quarantine.
We would continue to need to help Rock County Health Department contact trace. If someone tests positive, we help them identify who those close contacts are, and then Rock County Health Department notifies those close contacts that they're quarantined. We do have the ability, we have a larger group that's vaccinated at the high school, so that decreases both the likelihood of symptoms and the severity of those symptoms, and also decreases their quarantine status. But even with the recommendation that I had originally made, it's with the knowledge that by removing one of our layers of safety protocol, it increases the risk. And with that increased risk, there comes more positive cases and more close contacts.
How do you know that we would have more positive cases by removing masks?
There's plenty of data out there that shows that masks work. I think one of the most widely quoted studies is a comparison of counties across the country where masking is required versus where masking is optional. And there are many fewer positive cases in counties across the country where masking is required on a countywide basis than there are in counties where masking isn't required.
Did you receive that email from Mr. Miller, I believe?
I don't think so.
With the chart showing the different districts?
I don't think I have.
Okay.
No, if you could send it to me, I would definitely take a look at it.
Yeah, because that showed all the districts in the county, and 5 of the 8 of them are mass choice. And the numbers, as he spoke about, do indicate that they are very similar throughout. And I realize that we have a higher number of cases right now, but we have been no different than really any other district in the county as far as our trends. Okay, they're going up and down, ebbing and flowing. So that's why I asked, how can you state with accuracy that removing masks would automatically mean we're going to have higher numbers?
And again, I don't think that I said it would automatically mean that. I said that it would increase the risk. It would increase the risk and increase the likelihood. And the way that I can say that is based on the study that I just shared, and the fact that although our numbers have gone up and down, and other districts in the county's numbers have gone up and down, we've been consistently lower than other districts on both the number of positive cases and the number of close contacts. And we need to know that when we decide to remove masks and end our universal masking, that means that there's one less layer of protection, and that means, and it's clear in the data, that means the likelihood of positive cases goes up and the likelihood of close contacts goes up.
Thank you.
Rich, just reiterating, a fully vaccinated staff member or student with no symptoms would not be subject to quarantining. That is correct, right? Okay.
So I just have a question as well. Rich, remind us again where we're at as it relates to your authority to return to a mask mandate as part of the plan. So if in fact the motion does go forward, where are we at with your ability to then have to shift if we need to?
When we approved the Milton Forward Plan, the board gave me as the superintendent the authority to make short-term changes as needed. So if a situation warranted the need to either tighten our safety protocol or loosen our safety protocol, I've had the ability to do that throughout. I prefer to bring things to the board so that we have a public discussion on it, but there are situations where we may need to make changes without time to schedule a board meeting or to wait for a board meeting. So in general, the board has given me the authority, expressly given me the authority to make those changes if there's a need.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, I will repeat it one last time just so we're all clear on what we're voting for. The motion has been made by Leslie, seconded by Joe, to amend the Milton Forward Plan as per the following. 1, remove universal masking for all students and staff at the start of the school day of January 10th, and to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12. We'll do a roll call vote. Shelley, I'll start with you.
No.
Jen?
Yes.
Rick? No. Mike is a no. Leslie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Dave?
No.
Motion does not carry. Yes.
Back to.
You're muted.
You're muted too.
Sorry, let me unmute myself.
Don't.
Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So
You're good.
back to the start of all this, the goal was to get kids and families and staff the opportunity to be vaccinated. We've reached that point. Upon reaching that point, there's nothing in the immediate future that's going to change. There are a certain ceiling to what we'll get, and at that point, some people will probably change their opinion and get vaccinated, but at that point, the decision and the consequences, if there are any, are with them. And with that in mind, I would move to update the Milton Forward Plan to include the following information: removal of universal masking for staff and students in grades 7 through 12 schools, beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th, 2022, to continue universal masking for staff and students in all grade 4K through 6 schools, to be revisited at the first board meeting following the number of positive cases decreasing for 2 consecutive weeks for grades 4K through 6, to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12, and for outside groups and attendees at any events and district facilities will follow the COVID-19 safety protocol for that location as it's written.
I'll second that.
So there is a motion on the floor made by Dave, seconded by Leslie, to update the Milton Forward Plan to include the following information: remove universal masking for staff and students in grades 7 through 12, beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th, 2022, to continue universal masking for staff and students in all grades 4K through 6, to be revisited at the first board meeting following the number of positive cases decreasing for 2 consecutive weeks for grades 4K through 6, to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12, and outside groups and attendees at any events in district facilities will follow the COVID-19 safety protocols for that location. And that's just as it was written.
Correct.
Thank you, Dave. Is there any discussion on that new motion?
Yeah, I'll bring it up in the sense of, I find it's going to be extremely difficult to police families who have children that are little, have middle school children or 7th grade high school students. You're going to allow those 7th graders and the sophomore to not wear a mask, but their little brother has to wear a mask, and then they're going to come back home, and if they've obviously been in any kind of shape or at all exposed, then the little person, again, at some point, I feel like that is a nightmare for the staff, first of all, to do any kind of close contact for that. And I also feel, again, we've given each family the opportunity to become vaccinated. We've done our due diligence. We have done all that we can for these families to get vaccinated. And again, I feel like the younger kids, if it's a family thing for me, if you can't have the high schooler and the 7th grader able to not wear a mask, and then the little person is either going to be exposed regardless. Then I really feel like we're dividing families if in fact we choose to do this way, that the motion is written. And then I addressed the last part of Rich's suggestion initially, following the protocol for other locations. There again, other locations doesn't have the same protocol as we do. So now we're going to allow elementary basketball kids to go to a different location, and right as the motion states, we're going to allow them to follow the protocol of the place that they're in. Well, that's not going to be our protocol. So, exactly. So why would we even put that into the motion?
I bet that's the location that having an event at north side or east of the school, not.
I think this is only relative to district facilities, Jen.
It says, but it just says follow their protocol. So meaning, so an elementary school kid can do what then?
So if they go to basketball.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So if your basketball team for Woodland comes here, you have to follow, Woodland team has to follow their specific activity that they know.
Well, that is not happening.
Already happening.
But no, the basketball players are not wearing masks.
Which is already the rule when they're on the court. That's the rule in place today.
Right.
So it's simply saying whoever's here will follow the rules of the building, which is currently the rule that we have.
So, but what are we going to do about the littles?
It's the exact same thing we're doing now. There's no change in that. It's exactly what it is today.
Right. So why is it in the motion?
Because it's building specific. So if I had a high school basketball game at Milton East, the high school basketball game would have to follow the rules of Milton East, which obviously doesn't happen, but that's what it says, which is what the rule is today.
I think the challenge here, and what I think Jen is getting at, is the elementary student would be masked at school, but can go to their brother's basketball game at the high school and not be masked, the way this motion is written.
That is correct.
That's the ambiguity.
That's correct.
What would you amend?
The intent of that bullet point in the motion, in the original recommended motion, was to provide some clarity for different events. So if we're hosting a basketball game at the high school, and we're mask optional at the high school, that attendees at that event would not be required to wear masks. But if we have a high school team that's practicing at one of the elementary schools, or is going into the elementary schools, or any other outside group, would need to wear their masks when they're inside that building. So it was more building specific. I do see your point about our elementary students when they have some type of event at the middle school or the high school. So we definitely could tweak that, or amend that to require them to wear their masks whenever they're at any district facility, if that's what the board would prefer.
So I guess to reiterate my contention with it is, and again, the numbers speak for themselves, 15 through 18 is 76% vaccinated, 12 through 14 is 56, and 5 through 11 is 8. That 8 is going to migrate to those other numbers, but it's not there today. So if at the next board meeting it's there, that's wonderful, and we can revisit it at that point, but it's not there now. And that, I guess, is my only concern with it. And still, as proposed, the motion is a considerable change from where we're at today.
Can we add, does the motion, I guess the motion wouldn't include talking about this at the next board meeting on the 10th, right? Is that correct, Mike?
There's nothing.
Sorry, forward plan is at every meeting though?
No, we have voted for the second meeting.
Okay.
There's nothing in the current motion that states that.
Would we need to amend it to, because that's in part of the Milton Forward Plan, is that correct? That we talk about at the second meeting and not the first? Wasn't
It
that part
wasn't.
of that, a motion back in August?
It wasn't part of the Milton Forward Plan, but it was part of the action that the board took. So as of right now, we're putting it on the agenda at the second board meeting. And if the board in general just let me know now without even including it in the motion that they prefer to have it on the January 10th agenda so that we get an update coming back from Christmas, we'll just make sure that we have it on that agenda. If there's not any, if any board members don't see that as a good idea, you can share reasons why, but I think it would be a good idea to have it on the January 10th agenda.
I agree too, but does the 2 executive weeks, that includes school days, not when we're on break? Is that correct? So like, it wouldn't include the week after Christmas Day and then the week of January 3rd through, that wouldn't be 2 weeks, right? Because you can't
2
count.
weeks for what purpose? I'm sorry.
For the consecutive weeks that were in your original recommendation, it has to be when we're in school.
Yes,
Okay.
when we return to school. Because we don't track positive cases when we're not in school. Some families contact us if a student tests positive, but if they're not notifying us because of a student's absence, we typically don't always know about positive cases.
But wouldn't they need to if they contracted after that week after Christmas?
We would prefer that they do, but I couldn't guarantee that they would before that January 3rd when we return from break.
Okay.
Will we know the percentage of vaccinated younger people when we return?
We should. Rock County Health Department updates it pretty regularly.
So do we need to amend the current motion so that we can make that policy change, since that was action we took?
From my understanding, the only thing that's in debate right now is the last point about the outside groups and attendees at any events in district facilities will follow the COVID-19 safety protocol for that location.
Right, but my question was, because back in August, when we made that motion to go back to universal masking, we included that we would only give a COVID update the second meeting of the month. So do we need an amendment? No?
I don't believe that was part of a motion. That's just a decision that we've decided that we would do. So I don't think there's a motion. If we want to bring it to the first meeting in January, we can do that.
Okay.
So I think to answer your question, we don't need a motion for that. Does that answer the question? Okay. No, that's all
I
good.
just want to add that, what Jen said, one thing I don't think we're ever done with all we can do. I mean, we never stop making school safe for everyone involved. We don't wipe our hands and say we're done with it. Our job is to make it safe for everyone in school. And I think if we're going to go eventually to a mass choice, I want it to be for K through 12, not split up, because again, the logistics of it and everything like that, we want the same opportunity for all the kids and all the staff if we get to that point. So that's why I'm still probably going to vote no on this because of the date, and I want it eventually to be a 4K12.
Can I just ask, can I make a comment on that? Because I don't disagree with what you're saying by any means, but we do meet on the 10th. So we could theoretically vote mass choice for the elementary students on that night.
We have 1 week's data.
Well, but
I
mean, we could make any motion we want if we're talking about the subject. So we wouldn't necessarily have to follow the motion that's passed tonight if we made a motion that night. Is that accurate? Yeah. So what we're doing here, if you vote to pass this, then, you know, it's going to be 1 day, theoretically, of mass choice for the upper grades. Then that night, if you wanted to make the motion, or if somebody wanted to make the motion to go mass choice for the younger students, then we could do that. And they could start immediately. But, you know, this is moving us forward, so that's the idea here. I think that's what you were pointing out.
I would agree with Shelley as far as passing it for all kids for the sake of families. I do think it makes sense given the capacity of our hospitals, what they are now. I think if you remember back last year at this time, the hospitals were at capacity and we actually went virtual because that was the recommendation of Rock County. They're not recommending that this year, but we have hospitals and we've heard from nurses in the hospitals, at least one of them, that says they're at capacity. And schools aren't just anomalies. They're part of a community. And I think we owe it to our families to get through the holidays, and then on that first meeting in January, see where we are with the numbers, where we are with the high school numbers, the middle school numbers, the 4K6 numbers, and make decisions based on that. So that's my thought.
I just wanted to add that there are some things tonight that have really pleased me, all the data we've looked at, such as the high vaccination rates among our older students. Based on what I'm hearing kind of anecdotally in the community and the people I talk to every day, I think that the rates will be pretty good for our younger students. What concerns me is the continued vaccine hesitancy just kind of among our community in general. Please, I encourage everyone, go get vaccinated. If you're eligible for a booster, go get it. Get your kids vaccinated. I think that will, based on what we've heard tonight, that's what will help get us forward. I think that's all I'm saying.
Is there any more discussion? I'll remind the board there is a motion on the floor. Any more discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I have one more comment, Mike.
Sure.
I supported the first motion, obviously. This one, I'm probably going to support, although it's a bit clumsy for me because of the points that everyone has brought up that I can't disagree with. The one reflection I would have on this whole family thing is that you have to remember that people are already doing within their household whatever it is that they choose to do. So if the third grader has a mask at school and the ninth grader does not necessarily translate into what happens at home. And I'm pretty sure that it doesn't happen that way at home. So I can't read too much into what families are going to have for reactions and or choices when they're not in school. So I'm really not concerned about what happens outside of the school for the interaction among siblings, or that happens with everyone's own discretion. It is a bit clumsy though, and I guess I would rationalize here that when it's called a Milton Forward Plan, forward isn't necessarily a straight line, and I would yearn for some movement or some progress here. This is somewhat less appealing to me than the previous motion that didn't pass, but I do think it gets us, like I said, it's clumsy. You know, this whole COVID situation has been challenging, awkward, murky, chaotic, etc. So whatever the path out of it is, it's not going to be clean and easy for any of us. So I'm going to support this motion and look anxiously toward improved numbers and or circumstances that can help us visit the situation on 4K6 when we get back after the break.
Thank you, Joe. So before we vote, I'd just like to thank the board for respectful dialogue and just respecting other people's opinions. I appreciate that. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat the motion, but there is a motion made by Dave, seconded by Leslie. It is the recommended motion that was part of the documents in board docs, so you can read that for yourself. And we will take a vote now. I will start on the opposite side. Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry, Jen.
I just want to reiterate that I don't believe that last bullet point in the motion makes any sense. So, I mean, Rich agreed that you're going to allow a third grader now to come to the high school. I mean, I don't know. I won't vote yes to this particular motion, because again, I feel as though it has some flaws to it. And I also feel like, again, at some point, I voted yes to the first motion, but this one is just, I think that it's got. Calling the question?
I'm asking you, like, how would you make it so that you would support it?
I don't agree with the K through 6.
So Jen, if it was, students will follow the protocol for their own building.
Well, that piece, obviously, again, I feel that piece is.
I guess this is a big step forward. What you're suggesting is you would rather have nothing than something?
No, I guess I'm saying that I think the way that it is written is going to be a disaster for contact tracing, for policing the difference.
So wait, okay, I'm sorry.
And then again, the part about the location. If we can find some other.
So if we took off the location part of it completely, like if I were to make an amendment right now to remove the last bullet.
I would be much better with that.
And you would support the movement forward here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm making a motion to amend to remove the last bullet point indicating, sorry, I'm trying to read, outside groups and students portion. I'd like to remove that from the original.
So just to be clear, then you are making a motion to amend the current motion to remove the last bullet point, which states outside groups and attendees at any events in district facilities will follow the COVID-19 safety protocols for that location. Is that what you're wishing to strike?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second for that?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor made by Leslie, seconded by Joe, to remove the following wording from the original motion. Outside groups and attendees at any events in district facilities will follow the COVID-19 safety protocol for that location.
Does that mean when parents come in for meetings, they don't have to oblige by the building's rules if it's elementary? Because anyone is at events, attendees at events, so it could be conferences, it could be music event, it could be a meeting, an IEP.
Shelley, you bring up a good point. What if it just simply said outside groups at any events and district facilities will follow COVID-19 safety protocol for that location? And then that addresses your concern and your concern.
Yeah, it's not mine. I'm just trying to move us forward.
Understood.
I didn't hear that.
The other concern with requiring elementary students to wear masks when they attend events at the middle school or high school is that the supervisors at those events don't always know those students and aren't sure if a student is a 6th grader or a 7th grader. So they would have a difficult time knowing who should be masked and who shouldn't. The intent of that, and I understand Jennifer's points on then Joe described it as being somewhat clumsy, and I would agree that it's not very clear. The intent of that was that the rules in that location are in place for any outside groups that come into that location. So if someone comes in and uses one of our elementary schools, whether it's a parent coming to a meeting or a vendor or a group renting out the space, they would follow the protocol for that location. And if masking is required, and if masking isn't required but is just optional at that location, that anyone attending at that location would be able to have an option. I'm comfortable with that for our younger students coming to a high school basketball game and not being required to wear a mask. because their family is choosing to have them attend that event. And we would still have them when they're in school, in class, be required to follow the universal masking. But we know that families are making decisions outside of school all the time on different types of events. So I think I understand the intent of the amended motion. I want to make sure we remember that that's on the floor right now, so we do need to vote on it, but I want to make sure that people understand that if it isn't listed there, there's some ambiguity to it.
Just so it's clear what the vote on the amendment is to remove the fourth bullet point, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The amendment is to remove the fourth bullet point. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. And it's my recollection that Leslie made the amendment. I don't recall. Joe, you seconded it. Thank you. Any more discussion on that? Okay, we will take a vote. Roll call vote. We'll start back with Shelley. We're just voting on the amendment, not on the original motion.
So this is to accept the amendment, and if it's accepted, we'll vote again?
Correct.
Okay.
Shelley is a no. Jen?
Yes.
Rick?
No.
Mike is a no. Leslie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Dave?
Yes.
The motion passes. So now the original motion will be as follows. To update the Milton Forward Plan to include the following information: to remove universal masking for staff and students in grades 7 through 12 schools beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th, 2022. To continue universal masking for staff and students in all grades 4K through 6 schools to be revisited at the first board meeting following the number of positive cases decreasing for 2 consecutive weeks for grades 4K through 6. And to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12. That is the motion without the last bullet point, which the amendment that just passed eliminated. So that is what we are currently voting on. Is there any more discussion on that?
Mike, I have one more comment. I've been debating to amend the motion, but at the risk of belaboring this and confusing it, I just want to bring it up as a discussion point. I would feel more comfortable with the first phrases of that, instead of saying remove universal masking and institute something that says to institute mask choice. Because while it might seem subtle, we've all received a bunch of emails pleading with us to stay the course, if you will. And I can't, the community is probably half and half, but I think the connotation of removing universal masking makes folks think about zero masks. And we all know that's not the case. I hope it isn't the case. We want people to have that choice. We want to encourage that. So in my mind, if this is, a statement from the board, and if it's successful, which is an assumption, I would like to word it such that we're instituting mask choice rather than removing universal masking. And I guess as such, I would offer that as an amendment. I feel strongly enough that I would like to do that.
Then you have to clearly state what that amendment is, Joe.
Okay, which I will do.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I would like to amend the motion on the floor in the following manner. Bear with me while I bring it back.
Yep.
To remove the first 3 words of the first bullet point that say remove universal masking, and instead state to update the Milton Forward Plan to include the following information: institute masks choice for staff and students, et cetera, the rest of the way it's written.
I'll second that.
Okay, there is, make sure I'm not muted here. So there is a motion on the floor to amend the main motion with the following wording: to strike the first three words of the first bullet point, which state remove universal masking and replace it with institute mask choice. So that first bullet point would read, institute mask choice for staff and students in grades 7 through 12 schools beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th, 2022. Is that accurate, Joe?
It is.
Thank you. Yep, and that has been seconded by Leslie. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, we will vote on the amendment. Again, we're just voting on the amendment. I will start to my right this time with Dave.
Yes, it's the same thing.
Joe?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Mike is a yes. Rick?
No.
Jen?
Yes.
And Shelley? Motion carries. So now the original motion will be as follows. Again, the original motion was made by Leslie and made by Dave, seconded by Leslie, sorry. I move to update the Milton Forward Plan to include the following information. Institute mask choice for staff and students in grades 7 through 12 schools beginning at the start of the school day on January 10th, 2022. Continue universal masking for staff and students in all grades 4K through 6 schools to be revisited at the first board meeting following the number of positive cases decreasing for 2 consecutive weeks for grades 4K through 6, and to continue universal masking on all student transportation for grades 4K through 12. Any further discussion on that amended motion? Hearing none, we will vote on that motion that I just read, starting with Shelley. Jen?
Yes.
Rick?
No.
Mike is a no. Leslie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Dave?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on. Mr. Dahman, you have a point B, coronavirus relief funds for public schools.
I wanted to update the board on some recent funding changes for not just our school district, but for school districts, public school districts across the state. It is called, the name of the funding is called the Coronavirus Relief Funds for Public Schools. It is one-time funds. If you remember in our discussion about the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 funds, we've talked a lot about money that has come to the school district as one-time funds. So we're cautious on making any long-term expenditure commitments to it. There aren't restrictions on the use on this, or very few restrictions on the use. It really is just additional funding for school districts to address whatever needs are most important at that local district. And for our district, it comes to about $453,000. It was awarded after our budget was approved for this current year. And a couple things that I want to highlight there. We've talked earlier, when we talked about some of the ESSER funds, about how the current biennial budget has created what is a looming fiscal cliff for school districts across the state in 2 years. With no increase in controlled or per member revenue, and it's going to require that we use a portion of these funds and of our ESSER funds to maintain a balanced budget over the next 2 years. And beyond that, with uncertainty in the next state budget cycle, if you call it, the state sets its budgets for education and for the entire state in 2-year cycles called bienniums. So we know that 80% or approximately 80% of our costs typically increase. Those are things like salaries, benefits including insurance, utility costs, make up a very significant portion of our budget. And with no increase in controlled revenue over the next 2 years, we have some of this one-time money to help bridge the gap over the next couple of years. But we also have to be thoughtful about how we utilize that money so that we do have a balanced budget. So for this year, obviously, the board approved a balanced budget. For the coming year, the 22-23 year, we will be able to balance that budget with some of these federal funds and some reductions. But we do have to be cautious moving forward as we look at different ways to use those funds. So it was since the last board meeting that this has officially been approved. I wanted to update the board to let them know that that is additional one-time money that's available to the school district. And we will continue to have discussions about the best way to utilize those funds. And it's likely that we will be scheduling a finance committee meeting in January to continue that discussion. And that was the update. If there are any questions or thoughts from board members on that topic. If not, that was everything in the superintendent's update.
Thank you very much, Rich. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 3, presentations, and item A, state report cards. Mr. Ruggles, we'll invite you to the podium.
All right, so I got a lot of documents here. Hoping my voice keeps out here. I coached a lot of basketball this weekend, so I might have a little cracking as I'm going through. But we went 3-0 yesterday, so all is well. Thank you for giving me the opportunity here to come and talk about a report card today. Definitely some celebrations and definitely some opportunities for growth. We will talk about both of those categories. The one thing we definitely want to lead with, and overall, just if we can lead with anything, is this report card is a piece of our puzzle. It tells part of our story of who we are as a district. There's a lot of data that isn't in that report card that helps tell our story as well. We'll share some additional data here today and in the coming months. But it's something that we use as part of our continuous improvement process. So it is important that we look at it and use it as a mechanism to grow and continue to get better in everything that we do. We want to start with mission and vision because we always want to come back to that. I think it's important, especially when we have the for all piece at the end of our vision. We talk about opportunities, achievement, community for all. That will be something we talk about a little bit in greater detail when we talk about our growth scores and our target group outcomes as well. It is a commitment that as a district, we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our students in everything that we do. Our objectives today, I'm going to share just a real brief history of the report card, just real brief because we can get pretty detailed. Talk about some of the changes in the state report card from the last time that we received a state report card, that was 18-19 school year. I want to talk about a few of the highlights and data from our most recent state report cards. Next, we want to talk about the alignment to our scorecard process and how we're aligning the report card to some of our identified priorities from the start of the year when we spoke to this group about our Sr3 funding and some of our plans going into the year and how all that comes together. Finally, our last objective, we will lead this presentation into a discussion on Sr3 funding, and that will be led by Rich. And again, trying to tie that into the greater plan with not only our graduate profile, our strategic plan, but how it relates to our scorecard, and it all comes together. So, go back one. Okay. All right. So the history of our state report cards goes back quite a bit. It goes back to No Child Left Behind. And as a response to No Child Left Behind and that phrase that nobody liked adequate yearly progress, states were given an opportunity to create their own report card or mechanism, if you will, of how you can report out on our schools and our districts who are making adequate yearly progress. Wisconsin's version was the report card. The first report card came out in the 2011-2012 school year. So we have been doing it for a while. That first year, it was just the schools and not to districts. And in that year, we had 2 of our schools that exceeded expectations and 5 of our schools that met expectations with that first version. That next year, for the 2012-2013 school year, that was the first year that the state had a district level scorecard. And in that year, Milton met expectations within that first year. And over the years, we've seen quite a few changes within the report card, and not only how it looks, the formulas, the cut scores have changed significantly over the years, and the different priority groups and the weighting has evolved year to year as well. Part of that has been from an effort from the state and a commitment to closing our achievement gap within the state of Wisconsin. Part of that has been in response to districts with high levels of students that are economically disadvantaged, saying, how can you compare our district when we have 70% of our students are economically disadvantaged with a district that is maybe wealthy, 4 or 5% economically disadvantaged? It's not fair. So there's been lots of changes because of those demographics in terms of how they've weighted the different priority areas. And that has been, again, a ongoing change and push from the state in order to help close that achievement gap. All right, as we look at this year's report card, we were a meet expectations district, overall score of 67.4. What I want you to look at is that priority area weights, that piece of the pie, if you will. If you're looking from district to district and you're looking to compare us, and we highly encourage not to compare from district to district, and we highly encourage, the state has encouraged not to look from district to district. One of the reasons this priority weighting is different based on the number of economically disadvantaged students that every district has, and based on how the schools are set up. For instance, our elementary schools are only K-3. They are weighted in 2 areas only. So our elementary schools are only weighted in achievement and on track to graduation because of what grades are there. As I take just a look at some of the schools in the area, some of the schools in our Badger Conference, some of the schools in the Dane County area, some of the schools that we look for sometimes when we're looking at comparables, as I look at the priority area of achievement, that is weighted anywhere from 35% in one of the districts I looked at to 5% in one of the other districts I've looked at. So there is quite a difference. So if you are looking from district to district, definitely want folks to look at that piece of the pie. And I also want to highlight our tested participation. We're pretty proud of that fact that we tested 95% of our kids. And that was a big push by our principals and our staff. And I want to give a big thank you to our principals and to our staff. It was a lot of work. We had to create special schedules to bring our virtual students in to test. As part of the testing requirements, we were not allowed to test virtually. So we created some schedules where virtual kids were able to come in on some non-school hours, create the test. So we're proud of that 95%. As a state average for testing of students was right around 84% for ELA and 85% for math. So 10% more of our students were able to test. That's where our score is made up of. As we look at the state average, definitely less. One more time, as I look at some of our comparables in terms of the test participation, that varies and that's all over the board as well. So if you are looking from district to district, that is an important piece to look at. That piece of information can be found on, if you're looking on report cards on page 4 of the report card, after they listed achievement, it gives you the percentage of students that are tested compared to the state. So if you're looking for that information, that's where you find it. All right. As we look at achievement. So from an achievement lens, we were in the top 30% of the state. And as we originally reported to the Janesville Gazette, when we talked about how we were doing as a district, we are in the top 30% of the state in terms of student achievement. We're happy with that fact. We definitely know there's some room for improvement in different levels for our achievement, but overall, given all the circumstances over the last couple years, we're happy that we're above the state average, especially knowing that we tested a higher percent of our kids as well. And we talked about areas for growth. Our student growth and the next category are 2 areas that we've identified where we definitely know we want to do better. And when we talk about our mission and our vision for all, that is where this comes in for all. So in this priority area, we look at student groups for growth. And what this particular category is looking at is where our students are and looking at where they've gone over the last 3 years, and then comparing it to the state average in terms of typical growth for the rest of the students of Wisconsin. This is an area that we've looked at, we want to do better at. Last year, the majority of our interventionists were classroom teachers last year. They were not doing interventions as they would on a regular basis. And that was an effort on our part to make sure that we were able to spread kids out. We were able to keep class sizes smaller and make sure that our students were able to keep face-to-face instruction going on for the entire year. So we're hoping with all those interventionists now back just doing the job they're hired to do, be interventionists, in addition to hiring some more interventionists through the Sr3 funds this year. We feel like we are going to make some growth in this particular area. I'm actually a little bit ahead of myself. Go ahead. Okay. For the target group outcomes, actually one more thing around on the growth. One thing that I did want to note, going back to the for all students, our students that made the most growth this last year, according to our report card, were our students that were already proficient the year before. And our students that made the least amount of growth in Milton were students that were not proficient the year before. So it definitely highlighted for us that intervention piece, that needs to be a priority for us moving forward. All right, so target group outcomes. This is an entirely new category for this year. It's weighted very differently. And this used to be the closing gaps area. You know, as we look at all my different report card documentation here, I got the 21-page 2020-2021 report card guide to tell you how to read the report card. And accompanying that, there is the 9-page target group outcomes guide that gives us in great detail how they come up with those numbers. It is quite the process, but essentially what the target group outcomes is this. Previously, this category looked at the gaps. So it would look at our EL students and it would break our EL students or whatever group you're looking at based on each district's specific demographics and compare that group to the rest of our students. But what target group outcomes does is it takes our lowest performing 25% students and it compares that group of 25% of students to the rest of our students, and then it gives us a score based on the difference between how that 25% scored and how the rest of our students scored. You can see from an achievement lens, we have some high achievers, but we have some major gaps between how our lowest 25% of students scored and our top scoring students scored. There's definitely some gaps within the growth as well. When you factor in the chronic absenteeism and the graduation rate, we creep up a little bit closer, but we have some work to do as well there for our target group outcomes. The on track to graduation category has been a strength for us in Milton. We've typically had some pretty strong scores in this category, and that's weighted on a couple different things as well. It looks at our chronic absentee rate. It looks at, it's not coming up on here for me. It looks at our graduation rate, and then it takes our third grade English language arts grade scores, and it takes our 8th grade mathematics scores, and all those 4 things come together and make up our score for the on track to graduation. Because that 3rd grade ELA and that 8th grade math have been a couple benchmarks that have shown if your students are proficient by these points in these subject areas, they're more likely to be successful post-secondary. So that's why those metrics were chosen to be a part of this report card. One of the other changes to the report card this year, and I should highlight, we included a couple documents within the board docs just to help look everything over. One of them was a report card at a glance, just a 1-pager, not the 21-pager, just to kind of show there's so many differences this year visually from the last report card that if you put them up side by side, they're very different. And obviously there's lots of things that are different within it, but from a visual standpoint, they're laid out differently. I feel this latest report card is a little more easy to read and laid out in a better fashion. The second piece that we've included within board docs is what's new for the 2021 school and district report cards. Another one-page document that highlights some of the changes that went into this report card, highlights some of the things I've talked about already, as well as some of the things that I didn't go over as well. It gets in a little more detail about the target group outcomes priority area, and then one thing I should highlight is the deductions. There's been no deductions on this report card. In the past, if districts had not made a certain point for dropout rates or for absenteeism, they got an automatic deduction on their overall district report card. The state went away from the automatic deduction this year. I think 3 years ago now, the state went away from the automatic deduction for test participation. So previously, if you would have fell below a certain threshold, it was a 95%, that's the federal guideline. If you would have fell below that, you would have got an automatic deduction to your report card. So the state went away from that and said, hey, as long as there's federal guidelines to make you, keep your test participation high, they felt that was sufficient. Even though, as you can see, the state fell well below those thresholds this year. Some other changes within the state report card. Post-secondary preparation and the arts are added into the report card, but they're not part of the overall score or factored into the overall score. So this is part of state statute. So state statute said we had to include these within the report cards. It was a push to include more information, even though it's not factored in. And we feel pretty strongly about some of these numbers. I mean, these are some of our biggest celebrations, and they're not factored into our overall score. When we look at the students, our students in advanced courses, dual enrollment courses, or our students that are getting industry recognized credentials, we are above, in two of those cases, well above the state average. Our work-based learning, we continue to be above the state average. Amy Kenyon has done an amazing job with that program. We struggled a little bit in that area this year because of COVID. We struggled getting some employers in some situations, but overall, she's done an amazing job. And the other thing I wanted to highlight with this post-secondary preparation, even though these scores come straight from the high school, like this is a district celebration. The work that our K-8 does to get our students to this point, it is a collaboration and it is a team effort for us to be able to celebrate these things. All right. So as we take a step back and think about how we started the year, we had some of this data coming into the year. So we obviously didn't have the state report card yet. We knew there was lots of changes happening within how they were going to do the report card. We knew how our students did on the iReady. We knew how our students had done on the forward exam and ACT and our students in AP courses. So we used that data to develop some plans as we went into the year. And number one thing we talked about as we came here is we wanted to make sure we improved our universal practices for all students. That was a huge focus going into the year to make sure that if our universal is strong, that way we're hitting every single student that comes through Milton. We wanted to apply data and evidence to all of the decisions that we were making. And with that, again, using iReady, our connectedness survey, our 9th and 10th and 11th graders took the pre-ACT at the beginning of the year this year. We took some time to look through that data as well. And we're using that data for our planning of instruction and making changes at all of our levels. I want to highlight the work around our PLCs because really that's where we're diving into that data and trying to plan for our instruction for our students. With that, as we dive into the data, we're going to bring some recommendations to the HR committee for some additional positions and where we dug into the data and found the need. We did that through the PLC process and using good information in front of us. Last, we wanted to address immediate and long-term student needs. So we knew with the ESSER funds, there's going to be 3 rounds. The first one was about safely reopening schools. The second one was a little more instructionally focused. And the third one, which we'll talk about, is even different. We didn't want to spend it all at the beginning of the year. Like one of my kids, as soon as they get a dollar, they spend it. We wanted to make sure that it was planned out, that we were using data, and we spent some at the beginning of the year. As the year has gone on, we've had more ESSER 2 fund requests come in based on the needs that we've seen within the classroom. Many of those have been approved. Lots of great ideas coming forth from our teachers and from our principals, and we continue to use those funds to support student needs as they come up. Some of the things that we funded from ESSER 2 to start the year, again, based on some of the data that we knew, we implemented responsive schools, K-6, that touches every single kid in our K-6 buildings. The second step, curriculum, from a social emotional standpoint, that's been very important. Throughout the pandemic, we know the results, we know the need. Our focus has been on supporting students in their habits, managing their own emotions, and that has been a huge help for us within the classroom. 4.8, we've really focused in on some of our grading practices, and that will continue to evolve into next year as well with standards-based reporting. And our AVID practices 7.12 to really support our classroom instruction at both the middle school and the high school. Now, last year, unfortunately, with how things went, we implemented AVID a couple of years ago. It's an amazing program, and it's involving writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading in all of our lesson planning across the board. So it is a way for us to, it's not a curriculum, it is a way of instruction. Some of the collaborative practices we had to take a step back from over the last year. We're hoping as the year moves on, we can dive deeper into some of those collaborative practices we know are good for our kids. And one of the biggest things our staff has been taking on this year is our ELA pilot. They've been doing amazing work. We know we want to improve our ELA scores overall. Part of that is giving our teachers good resources and access to good resources. It's been a need within the district, and during the pandemic, especially when we were virtually teaching, it showed that it was a hole for us. It was a deficit. We needed some good quality reading resources for all of our teachers to be able to use with their students across the board. So we are currently running ELA pilots at every level, and we're evaluating how those are going at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to bring a recommendation come third quarter to the curriculum committee on what our next steps will be. All right. Additionally, I spoke a little to this already. As the year has gone on through PLCs, we've identified needs as the year has gone on, and we've made changes. And each building at each level has implemented different supports based on their data, based on information that has come up through their classroom teachers. And we've responded to that through these ESSER funds, through some of our PD, in order to, again, try to make sure that all means all, that we're supporting all kids, and that really honing in on those two categories of growth and targeted group outcomes. And our principals have had a laser-like focus on those areas and have brought forth some really good information for us. So. All right. What questions would you have for me before we take the next step and start talking what ESSER 3 is and how that will affect us?
Did you? Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank you. That was very informative. And I know Milton has always been known for its high achievement, and that's great. And I know we want to continue that trend, obviously. So I asked it mostly just to speak this out loud. Okay, so I just kind of want to know these answers in general for the people here and the people listening at home. What do you consider, or what does the district consider to be acceptable proficiency for ELA and math? like we saw the scores of, you know, let's go back, we're looking at, I mean, cause let's pretend like nobody understands how to read the scorecard except you. So let's say that, okay. What would be considered an acceptable proficiency score? Like where we would really, you know, throw out the Raptors and celebrate, and, you know.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of pieces to the answer. Okay. Number one, I would say I would want to see us growing at every level. So we talk about all means all, like, so we want all kids, all right? So to have every single kid, every single student in Milton to be proficient, that's a hard order, right? Yeah. So we look at the data where we're at now and chart a course to make sure that we are seeing improvement at every single level. And overall, I look at it from a student growth standpoint as well. I think looking at our growth and looking at our target outcomes needs to be a major focus for us. Because while we might not get all kids to proficient, if we can get a kid that is way below basic up even to basic, you know, high basic, boy, that's quite an achievement to move that kid along. And then what's next? And then what's next? So while I don't want to say this number exactly, I would say number one, we look at individual student growth that kids are meeting their yearly growth. And within that, we are taking kids and moving them from one level to the next. And if we focus on that strategy, I think overall we're going to have some great results for every single school.
That's a great point. And I think probably every teacher ever has can speak to that.
Yep.
So with you said that we were considered the top 30%.
For our achievement, yes.
For our achievement.
Yeah.
So that's not us going from 95 to 293 or something like that. That's not what that's talking about. Is that correct?
So when you look at page our report card, it's on page 3 of our report card. You see at the top where it says achievement, and it gives you that priority area scoring. To the right of that, there's a graph that shows that our district score was the same or higher than 71.1% district in the state. So just from a straight achievement district lens, we're in the top 30%. Now, while we wanted to talk about that, part of the reason that we want to talk about that is because we're proud of the achievement overall as a district. We're trying to discourage the looking at district to district to district because there's such a variance in the priority weighting. There's such a variance in the percentage of students that have actually tested. And you know, we looked at some of our comparables and put them down next to each other. And it's fascinating when you put them down, but that even if their achievement might be off just a little bit, we could have major swings in scores because of other factors, and such as if they don't have a large amount of high achievers and their lower 25% of that target group maybe scores a little bit higher. We saw one school that had a very high target group score, even though our achievement was higher than theirs, and their target group outcome scores was in the high 70s. So it's fascinating to look at those differences, but we're trying to discourage, if you're really going to dig deep, then let's make sure you're looking at all those factors.
Sure. No, and I understand that. So how do you explain then to the average person who looks at this and sees, oh my gosh, Milton fell, 200 places. Yep. How do you, I mean, like, without doing what you just did, like, how do you on a very layman's term level explain that?
Mm-hmm. In layman's terms, I'd say this. I'd say overall, we're still, as a district overall, we feel like our achievement, we know is better than the state average, but we don't want to go just by that. We know we need to make improvements in that growth and target area. So I guess I try not to shine a light on the comparison piece and say, hey, look how so-and-so is doing. We know where we need to improve on, and we know where we have some celebrations. So without dig into it with that person, I would say, yeah, we have some things we need to work on within those two categories.
And I just have one more question. Sorry, Dave. With the testing, so getting the students up to 95% or higher, the numbers that we tested. Why did we push for that during this last year, knowing that we struggled because of COVID and virtual learning and off and on cohorts and things like that? Why did we? Was it just the federal level piece we didn't want to take the ding in the scorecard, or was there something more to it?
It was my belief, and many of our beliefs, that we wanted to test as many of our kids so we had a true representation of how our kids were doing in Milton across the board, whether they're in virtual, whether in hybrid, or whether they're in full-time school. I think it was important that if this is how we're being rated, that it's a true representation of all of our kids. So I did push hard that we test all of our kids, and I know many of our admin agreed with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ryan, yeah, I would back that up. I mean, the larger the sample size in anything, statistical is going to give you a higher degree of confidence in the outcome. So I think that made a lot of sense, not as it relates to what will our scorecard be, but as it relates to what students do we have that could use some assistance. And as I read through the scorecard or the report card over the weekend, it seemed like from the last report card to this report card, the students that were successful academically continued to be so, and the ones who were struggling from then till now struggled probably more. And I know you had mentioned earlier, interventionists kind of tackling this data and digging into it. Maybe the answer is ask me next meeting, but is it the interventionist kind of finding groups of students and then finding human beings, whether it be tutors or additional staff or whatever, to get with those students on these subject areas? Or what do you view as taking the kind of the high level outline here too, something tangible of, we have these people who are going to work with these students on these specific skill sets is probably the outcome. Is that, do you feel like that's a January answer, or is it too soon to tell, or perhaps am I misinterpreting where things go from here?
No, because we've been doing some of that work already this year, and when we brought forth some of the ESSER ideas, one thing we brought forth for K-6 was we brought forth the plan to bring in some interns this year, and the interns are matched with a classroom teacher, and it frees up that classroom teacher for half the day to run some in-class small group interventions. And I know some of our principals can speak, pretty highly to the work that they're doing already. And we've identified some additional intervention needs that we want to make sure that we bring forth here to the HR committee just actually tonight.
Ryan, I think it might be valuable just to, rather than waiting until January, to give the board a better idea of kind of how that process works. If maybe if John Lyon could step to the podium and just give a really brief overview of what that looks like at Northside. Northside's a good example because our lower elementary only have a third grade score on the report card. So as Ryan shared earlier, they don't have a growth score. They don't have a target group score. Northside tests all of its 4th, 5th, and 6th graders and in both ELA and math, and they get a more robust report card. So John, if you could just briefly kind of highlight both steps to identifying students in need of support and in general how that support is provided.
You bet, Rich. So at Northside, it's about to be assessment season. So we're going to be taking our iReady assessment shortly after winter break. So these Wisconsin forward scores are very important for like the overall system and district perspective. But we're thinking about identifying students who have a need. We really triangulate that data looking at multiple iReady points, formative classroom assessment in the classroom, teacher recommendation, and iReady to identify the kids that are most in need. So at Northside in particular, one thing we're looking to do is like a morning opportunity hour to provide additional discrete instruction, like in decoding, comprehension strategies, basic number and operations for kids, and place value concepts they've missed along the way. So really narrowing down what that instruction is going to be and trying to match it to what the individual students have. So that happens during the school day now, before school. Ryan had mentioned the release time that we have with the interns, right, to be able to use some of our staff with additional licensure to work with kids. So it's an ongoing process that happens with a team of educators to making sure we're identifying the groups of kids most in need. So that not only applies to academic areas, we look at attendance, right? We look at office discipline issues, and multiple pieces of data to really consider the whole child.
Sorry, go ahead, Dave. Sorry, I just thought of one more. So the way the scorecard works, so it appears that, and I realize that we look at 3 years together, but it appears that we are in a downward trend. So is that alarming to you guys? I mean, is that something that we need to be seriously looking at a deeper level than what we are, or do you feel confident that we're moving where we need to be going?
I do feel confident that we're moving where we're going, because I think we're addressing some of the biggest pieces that we need to address. Number one, we have iReady in place now, and it is data that we're using on a regular basis. I can say when we had a different screener, I didn't see the conversations that we're having now around student outcomes and student achievement. So that has been great. Number two, we're looking at making sure that all of our teachers have the resources they need across the board. So we have invested quite extensively in some curriculum and some resources over the last couple of years, and really focusing on that universal instruction. We've been focused in on making sure at a universal level, 85% of our kids should be getting what they need. So that has been where we really wanted to put a major part of our focus. So overall, yes, we're aware, and we're looking at that, and we're putting some major effort into making sure that we turn that around. Yeah.
Just a couple points, Ryan. One is there was some discussion about the number of students that Milton tested. The reality is every district in the state is supposed to be testing almost every student within the school. And so the fact that we are testing that many says a lot about our district. The intent isn't to eliminate kids from the testing, because that doesn't give you an accurate view of what your student body can do.
Exactly.
The other thing is, speaking from someone who used to be an interventionist, the reality is every teacher should be able to teach every student in a classroom, and every teacher should be able to move students forward in the classroom, from those that are the most academically gifted to those that are the most struggling students. And I think as a district, that should be our goal. I think it is your goal. That's what I heard you say, that the universal curriculum. But the mentality of our staff shouldn't be that those kids that struggle is someone else's job. It's every teacher's job to work with all students and to move all students forward. And I think that's really an important thing that we need to stress with our staff.
Agreed. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ryan?
Can I share a couple key takeaways that our admin team as a whole had on the report card? Okay. Yeah, I've sat under that before. I know what you mean. If I could just take a moment or two to share a couple key takeaways that our full admin team has had in looking at the report cards. One was around that new scoring system, that there's more of a focus on the growth and the targeted group outcomes than there has in the past, and less of a focus on achievement and the progress to graduation. We saw consistently across our schools that we scored higher in the achievement area and the progress to graduation areas than we did in the growth and the targeted outcomes. Those lower scores were in that growth and targeted outcomes, as you saw in the comparison. So we really want to make sure that we're not just saying our achievement is above the state average in ELA and math, so that's good enough, because I think Dave said it well earlier that our students that have done well continue to do well. And when we compare that overall group to the group that isn't doing well, we see some considerable gaps. And we really want to make sure that, as Mike shared, that we aren't saying somebody take care of those kids that are struggling. It really is an effort that needs to take place among our entire staff, and not just our teaching staff, but our support staff, our administration, everyone, making sure that we have a system in place where we identify students who are struggling, and we have a clear system in place on how we provide that additional support to what those students are also getting in the regular classroom. Ryan shared earlier the importance of reaching at least 85% proficiency based on our universal instruction and curriculum. And then we have those additional supports for the students in that other 15% that need those additional supports. And then the other that I wanted to highlight, there was some discussion about the percent of students tested. And I know it was hit on earlier that is something that we should be proud of as a district, that we tested 95% of our students. And we're not going to bemoan other districts that chose to test a lower percent of their students, but we do need to be alert when we compare our scores to other districts that we may be comparing to a district that only tested 60 or in some cases fewer than 60% of their students. So we're cautious when we make those district to district comparisons because we want to compare apples to apples. But we also identified some things that it's vitally important that we continue to get better at. We're focusing some of our ESSER funds into ways that we can get better, and really focusing, since those ESSER funds are one-time funds, into things that have a long-lasting effect, things that don't just provide a short-term bump, but aren't long-lasting. We're really focusing on things that are going to be long-lasting for our staff and for our students.
Any other questions for Ryan? Thank you, Mr. Ruggles, appreciate it. And Rich, you're going to take over for item B, the Sr3 plan?
Yes, Marcy, if you can pull up that portion of the presentation. We have a couple slides. It's the Sr3 information is still unfolding. The guidance from DPI has changed a bit as information from the federal government has adjusted. The DPI portal recently opened last week with more specifics, but there are still continued discussions between the state and the feds about what that final outcome is going to be for ESSER funds. So the presentation today is at a fairly broad level because of that. And if we look at, the slide that you're on right now, it's the American Rescue Plan Act that was the third federal COVID-19 relief fund. It was passed back in March of 2021, and it provides one-time funding for our district through the Sr3 grant program. Since the time that was passed at the federal level, states have been required to put together a plan on how they will allow their districts to access those funds, and that's the portion that there's still some ongoing discussion between the state and the feds. But in general, we're expected to receive about $1.9 million in Sr3 funding. It is one-time funding, and the main requirement on those funds is that at least 20% needs to be used to address the academic impact of lost instructional time through the implementation of evidence-based interventions. We spoke a little bit about some of the interventions that we have in place now. 20% of that 1.9 million is about $380,000 that we would earmark at least that amount directly toward those addressing the lost intervention time. Those funds can be used to support our response taking place from a start date of March 13th of 2020, and they can continue to be used through September 30th of 2024. And the funds are intended to help safely reopen, sustain the safe operation of schools, address the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the nation's students. So those are some of the key points. And if we look at that next slide, some of the next steps that we have coming up as a district, we're continuing to identify and prioritize those needs. We've shared information about our use of the ESSER1 funds. We're really around safety mitigation programs. The ESSER2 funds, we've prioritized both improving our universal instruction and implementing some intervention programs that have been discussed earlier. With our use of the SR3 funds, as those are becoming available, we want to continue to dig into student data, review that information with our staff through our professional learning communities and our building leadership teams. We not only use our school report cards to identify student needs, but we use our iReady scores in ELA and math, and also classroom assessments to determine student needs. We're incorporating evidence-based practices and then gathering feedback from stakeholders. One of the things that we're going to do to gather feedback from not just staff, but parents and also from students is we're going to be putting out a feedback form that'll be available on our website, and we'll email it out to community members for any feedback about areas that they consider to be priority areas for our use of the SR3 funds. Our plan is to tie our spending and our use of those funds to continuous improvement process. We have our strategic plan, our graduate profile, our scorecards that every school puts together, and utilizing that process to continue to look for ways that we can get better at what we do. We've met with principals. They're leading the look at student data in their buildings, as Principal Lyon described. They're reviewing that information and looking for ways that we can provide that additional support. As we shared earlier, the remaining funds, the 1.9 million, I shared at least 20%, so at least that 380,000 needs to be spent on intervention for students. That still leaves a pretty significant pot of money. We can make decisions around how we utilize the rest of those funds. There are some restrictions on it, but the main restriction is that it needs to be related to both mitigation efforts or intervention for students to address learning loss or interrupted learning. But we also know that because of the system that's in place and what I shared earlier about the additional one-time money coming from the state recently, we also have gaps in our proposed budget for the next couple years because of that lack of change in that per pupil funding moving forward. So there will be a need to utilize some of those funds to ensure that we're able to have a balanced budget for next year and for the following years. So I'd open it up to any questions or thoughts that board members have on the SR3 funds. I don't think I shared in this section, but I did share earlier that we'd be looking at a finance committee meeting in January, and in addition to the other funds, digging in more deeply into availability of the SR3 funds. And if you do recall, one decision that the board made earlier for the 80% that's not required for student use was the replacement of the boiler at Milton High School to help improve the indoor air quality and replace a 50-year-old boiler there.
Any questions for Rich on the ESSER funds? It appears not. Thank you, Mr. Dahlman. Moving on to item number 4, Human Resources Committee. Mr. Mullen, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. The HR committee has met twice since our last board meeting. Our first meeting was on November 29th. First item discussed was the Benefits Advisory Group meeting review. The Benefits Advisory Group met on November 3rd. The first item discussed was an update on the school year staff wage payments. The district currently offers school year employees a choice on how many paychecks to receive over the course of a year. For the 22-23 school year, the district is reviewing a single pay option. This would simplify things in the business office and also comply better with state and federal laws regarding when employees are paid for the work they've performed. Next item was an update on life insurance marketing efforts. The business office is working with USI to get life insurance quotes from various companies. The current plan offered has a paid up benefit that costs the district about $115,000 per year, but this plan is no longer offered. Options will be shared at future Benefits Advisory Group meetings. Next item discussed was the other post-employment benefits discussion. Al Yeager from USI discussed how districts are trying to stay competitive in the current market. Salary, benefits for active and retirees are all important for people to look at when they are considering their own employment options. A peer comparison has shown that Milton's OPEB expenses are on the high end of that spectrum. We also discussed how and if changes are made, it would be best to do it in a phased-in approach. This would allow us to consider the different needs of those close to retirement, those in the middle of the career, and those newer, younger staff. The last item was a change to the health reimbursement process. HR and payroll have been working with Diversified Benefit Services and Dean Health. And starting January 1, all explanation of benefits will automatically be shared with Diversified for processing, so staff will not have to submit the EOBs for reimbursement. Any questions or comments about the Benefits Advisory Group? Next item was a Employee Wellness Group update. The Employee Wellness Group, which consists of about 12 employees, has met twice this fall. They have discussed with the facilitators from Steeping Wellness and Dean Health what the goals of the group are and what to focus on in the group's first year. The group is looking into activities to offer the staff, such as learning videos, workouts, nature walks, and various fitness apps. Any comments or questions about that? Next up was the employee handbook update. The HR staff has received a first draft of the new handbook from USI. HR and payroll are looking over that draft, and we'll look for changes or updates to be made before resharing it with USI to be updated. And the last item was the teacher compensation model update. The work group, consisting of members of the administration and the teaching staff, have met 3 times since school started. The goals of this group are to come up with a manageable, sustainable, and competitive teacher compensation model. The HR committee also met in executive session on December 6th to talk more about this model, and we will all be discussing this later in executive session. Any comments or questions about any of that? Thank you. That's it, Mike.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you to the committee for all your time. Moving on to new business. Point A, we'll invite Mrs. Kramer to the podium to discuss possible action on a first grade teacher for second semester at Milton East.
I'm just going to open it up and see, is there any questions regarding the memo? Most of the information is in there, but if there's any clarification needed, I'd be more than happy to either speak to it or dig deeper.
Jen, I had one question. It
Sure.
appears that a current teacher is going to take a different position. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of my first grade teachers, who is also teaming up with an intern this semester, has been doing some reading interventionists, and it would be my recommendation to turn into a full-time interventionist for the rest of the remainder of this school year only.
Okay.
And then hire a first grade teacher to replace her.
So then that group of students who's currently with that teacher would have a different teacher for the second
Possibly.
semester.
Okay. Yep, hire the best candidate for the position, and all interns and people will apply.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the person that's potentially going to be hired would do so under the guise of the knowledge that they might not have a position next year.
Right, exactly.
Thank you, Jen. I'd like to make a motion to approve the addition of a 1-year, 1.0 FTE first grade teacher at Milton East Elementary for the second semester of the 21-22 school year as presented.
I'll second that.
There's a motion on the floor made by Rick, seconded by Shelley, to approve the addition of a 1-year, 1.0 FTE first grade teacher position at Milton East Elementary School for the second semester of the 2021-2022 school year as presented. Any other discussion on that?
The teacher that you want to move to the interventionist role, full-time, the student capacity is there for that, I assume? That's
The need?
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of our second and third grade students at Milton East, the data is showing that our tier 2, as you heard Ryan talk before, universally, the tier 1, we'd like to have 80-85% of students at grade level or above. And then the tier 2 would be more of that 15, and our numbers in that area are much higher than that. And so that would be our targeted group, that tier 2, and try to bump them up to grade level the remaining, like the end of the school year.
Right.
Yep.
Is it possible that you would need this person to stay in that role the following year?
Well, there's always that possibility, but what I'm recommending tonight is just to,
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just asking.
If the need was there, I would come back to this podium and ask again. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Jen.
Yep,
Appreciate
thank you.
that. Move on to item B, Mr. Lyon, a similar item accepts with possible action on a half-time FTE math interventionist and a half-time 0.5 FTE fourth grade teacher for the second semester at Northside.
Correct. Thanks, Mr. Hoffman. Just a couple of considerations there. The first ask of the halftime math position is really a continuation of what we started the year with the full-time position. It ended on October 31st. So we are going to get somebody in place to help with some of the intensive math needs. We already have a halftime person in place with Ms. Crystal Gross, that she uses her release time during the day. So with this halftime position, we create a full-time spot at Northside to work with our most intensive mathematicians. The other area is a later ask because we had an intern candidate lined up for Mrs. Laura Corelli, who has some additional reading, licensure, and expertise. And that intern candidate took a job for greener pastures, and we weren't able to find somebody else. So that's why we're asking for that position. We do currently have 4 interns that are working for us now, and several may be interested in that spot too, as far as our plans to try to fill those positions if they're approved. So, questions from the board?
So again, John, just to be clear, then the current fourth graders that have Mrs. Gorelli will have a different teacher for the second semester?
Possibly. The current intern candidate may be interested in this position if we're to become open. We have to go through a hiring process.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, I would move to approve the addition of a 1-year half-time FTE math interventionist and a 1-year half-time FTE fourth grade teacher position at Northside Intermediate School for the second semester of the 2021-22 school year as presented.
I'll second that.
There's a motion on the floor made by Leslie, seconded by Dave to approve the addition of a 1-year 0.5 FTE math interventionist and a 1-year 0.5 FTE fourth grade teacher position at Northside Intermediate School for the second semester of the 2021-2022 school year as presented. Any more questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Lyon. And item C, action on the 2021-22 open enrollment alternative applications, which are in board docs.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-22 open enrollment alternative applications as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion on the floor made by Rick, seconded by Dave to approve the 2021-22 open enrollment alternative applications as presented. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous action on staffing reports.
Mr. President, I would move to approve the staffing report as presented.
Motion on the floor made by Dave, seconded by Leslie to approve the staffing report as presented. Any question or discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to action on gifts and donations.
Mr. President, I would move to approve the gifts and donations with gratitude.
Second.
Motion on the floor made by Leslie, seconded by Rick to approve the gifts and donations always with gratitude. Any discussion? I would just like to say one thing. It's great to be in a community where so many people are generous with their money toward the efforts of our school. So those gifts are always appreciated. All in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Upcoming meeting dates, Mr. Dahman.
Our next regular school board meeting is on January 10th and January 24th, both at 6:30 here in the PDC. I mentioned earlier that we need to schedule a finance committee meeting. Ideally, that would be sometime during the week of January 17th. It might be worthwhile because we haven't looked at dates where Carrie and I are both available. If we take a look at some dates tomorrow and email them out to the finance committee, does that sound all right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good point. We'll look at around that time. We'd like to do it before the 24th. If we can't find a date before January 24th, we'll move it to after, but we'll throw out some potential dates to the finance committee.
So no other committee meetings?
No other committee meetings that need to be scheduled right now. And I know that Chris Tukendorf is out today, and we need to keep moving on some HR things. I don't know, Rick, if he has mentioned to you a potential date. That's something that we can check on okay, that sounds good.
That we can bring our calendar then to the second board meeting.
We'll take a look sometime between the 10th and the 7th and the 10th and the 24th. We do have the state school board convention the end of that week, so we'll send out emails to board members on those committees, curriculum, finance, and HR.
All right, thank you. Before we have a motion to go into executive session, I'd like to thank Marcy for being here tonight in lieu of Kim's absence. Appreciate your time tonight, Marcy. There was a lot to cover and to take in, so very much appreciate you being here. So I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session per state statute 19.85 subpoint 1 subpoint C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. And this pertains to teacher compensation model and to conduct the superintendent performance evaluation.
Second.
Motion made by Joe, thank you. Seconded by Leslie. We will do a roll call vote. Dave? Yes. Joe? Yes. Leslie? Yes. Mike is a yes. Rick?
Yes.
Jen? Yes. And Shelley. We are in executive session. And we are not coming back to open. And we will take a quick break for anyone that needs a drink or a bathroom.